Epimetheus, also known as Epimetheus, was one of the original Grand Masters of the Grey Knights chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. Epimetheus originally hailed from the Dark Angels Legion of the Legione Astartes during the time of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, with his true identity remaining a mystery even to this day. Like the other founding members of his chapter, Epimetheus would be brought before both Malcador the Sigillite and the Emperor of Mankind prior to the onset of the Siege of Terror during the Horus Heresy, where he, along with several others recruited by Malcador himself, would form the foundation of a dedicated force that could stand against the malevolent warp entities that threatened humanity. Epimetheus, alongside the warriors that would become known in historical records as Janus, Chiron, Koios, Ogun, Iapto, Jotun, and Satra, would be granted the honor of becoming the first Grand Masters of the chapter, with Janus being appointed as their first Supreme Grand Master. Epimetheus and his new battle brothers would then traverse through a webway portal that led to the moon of Titan, before the moon was hidden away within the depths of warp space, allowing the Grey Knights to hone their skills against all things demonic without being disturbed, before re-emerging from the warp during the course of the Second Founding. Sometime after this, Epimetheus would be appointed as the Warden for an object known as the Damnation Cache, which acted as a doorway between the material realm and the warp, located upon the world of Pythos. Epimetheus, alongside a small contingent of Psykers, would personally stand sentinel over the seventh and final seal of the Damnation Cache for several millennia, with the seal being locked away behind a stasis field and the Grey Knight entering a state of suspended animation. In late M41, Epimetheus would finally awaken from his stasis, due to the careless actions of a band of Chaos cultists led by the former Inquisitorial acolyte Tryphena Brand, who sought to break this final seal for her new master, Abaddon the Despoiler. The Grey Knight, with the aid of the junior Inquisitor Zula Degrees and a number of Catachan jungle fighters, would swiftly dispatch the cultists, although Tryphena, in an act of defiance, would unleash the contents of a vial which contained within it the dreaded Life Eater virus. The virus would successfully penetrate the stasis field and kill the Psykers congregating around the seal, forcing Epimetheus and his new unlikely allies to flee. The awakening of Epimetheus could not have come at a better time for the world, as Abaddon, with the aid of the Chaos Lord Huron Blackheart, would launch a full-scale invasion of the Pandorax system, with the Despoilers seeking to break the seals that locked away the Damnation Cache. This invasion, which became known within Imperial records as the Pandorax Campaign, would pit the forces of Abaddon and Huron against not only the Catachan jungle fighters, but also the warriors of the Dark Angel and Grey Knight Space Marine chapters, personally led by Azrael and Kaldor Drago, respectively. While Epimetheus would not fight alongside his fellow Astartes upon the battlefield, the Grey Knight would nonetheless prove to be an exceptionally skilled warrior, slaying a multitude of foes, including cultists, heretic Astartes, and demons alike. While the traitor legions would succeed in shattering the seals that contained the Damnation Cache, unleashing scores of demonic entities from the warp, this gateway into the Immaterium would eventually be sealed away once more. Towards the end of this campaign, however, Epimetheus would be lured into a trap before being subdued and eventually taken prisoner by Abaddon. The Grey Knight would then become bound and chained like an animal, with a psychic null surgically grafted onto his back, in order to prevent Epimetheus from utilizing his formidable psychic abilities. Abaddon would admit to himself that he would love nothing more than to break the Grey Knight's spirit and have him bend the knee to the War Master. Epimetheus's final fate from here is not entirely clear. So what could have happened to him? One of the few things known for certain during Epimetheus's time in captivity is that Abaddon would inform the Grey Knight that he had a keen interest in the warrior's gene seed, uttering the following to Epimetheus before rendering the Grey Knight unconscious with a single blow to the head.
Don't worry, it's not only your psychic abilities I'm interested in, it's your genetic legacy I want too.
As such, it seems logical to assume that Abaddon would have had the Grey Knight's progenoid glands, the organs which contain all of the genetic information needed to create future generations of Space Marines, surgically removed from Epimetheus's neck. While Epimetheus was originally a member of the Dark Angel's Legion prior to becoming a Grey Knight, it is worth noting that after becoming inducted into the chapter, his original progenoid glands would be removed and replaced with the unique gene seed utilized by the Grey Knights. Unlike the gene seed of other Space Marine chapters, with many examples of which producing a number of pronounced physical or psychological flaws, the genetic sequence utilized in the creation of the Grey Knights was not drawn from one of the 20 Primarchs, but instead derived from the very DNA of the Emperor himself. As a result, the gene seed born by the Grey Knights is said to be purer, both at a spiritual and genetic level, than that of other Space Marine chapters, appearing to be utterly devoid of any flaws or defects. The evidence for Epimetheus having his gene seed replaced upon his induction as a Grey Knight is shown with the following passage from the novel Pandorax.
Epimetheus tucked his arms and legs in as the ground quickly came up to meet him. It had been 10,000 years since he had free-fallen from a moving craft. In the days before he had sworn his new oaths and his gene seed swapped out for that containing the Emperor's own biological material. But the memory of it came easily to him.
With this in mind, perhaps Abaddon intended to somehow corrupt the Grey Knight's gene seed, perhaps in order to create his own, for lack of a better term, Dark Knights. After all, the Grey Knights pride themselves on the fact that none of their number has ever fallen to the temptations of the ruinous powers. Indeed, their resistance is so great that the Grey Knights are even rumoured by some to be completely immune to the corrupting influence of chaos entirely. However, this claim is little more than one of many rumours surrounding the chapter. While it is true that no Grey Knight has officially fallen to chaotic corruption, some have certainly struggled to resist its influence. For example, those who are forced to remain within close proximity of the demonic weapon known as the Blade of Antweer will find the process of resisting its call to be both a spiritually and physically demanding task. And as such, only a battle brother of the chapter's Purifier Order, who are seen by the other members of their chapter as being utterly incorruptible, can be appointed to act as the warden of this blade. But given the unique properties and unparalleled genetic purity of Grey Knight gene seed, if Abaddon is somehow able to corrupt it, then such material could be utilized in the creation of a whole new breed of traitor Astartes, which could in turn go on to become an elite group of shock troopers within the Black Legion. While this may initially seem to be somewhat plausible, this possibility seems to be fairly unlikely. While the Grey Knights are indeed formidable warriors, whose skill at arms and psychic might will often outclass even the mightiest of Astartes from other chapters, the main reasoning behind this is less as a result of their genetic lineage, and due more in part to the exceptionally harsh and demanding training regimen that the Grey Knights are forced to undergo when inducted into the chapter. However, there is another, more fascinating possibility. Given the Grey Knight's resistance to the corrupting energies of chaos, perhaps Abaddon is instead trying to prevent himself from becoming increasingly corrupted, so as to retain an iron grasp over both his humanity and soul. Abaddon believes that the main reason as to why his Primarch, Horus Lupercal, was defeated by the Emperor of Mankind during their duel upon the Vengeful Spirit was due in part to Horus fully devoting himself to the Chaos Gods and abandoning all traces of his humanity. This in turn, despite the godlike power bestowed upon him by the ruinous powers, would ultimately render the Primarch overconfident and weak, as detailed with the following quote from the 3rd edition Chaos Space Marine Codex.
Horus was weak. Horus was a fool. He had the whole galaxy within his grasp, and he let it slip away.
Despite having the blessings of the Chaos Gods, thanks in part to completing certain tasks given to him by the demon Primarchs in order to earn their patron god's favor, Abaddon remains stubbornly independent, and as a result, will attempt to hold on to both his humanity and soul at any cost. This in itself is the primary reason as to why Abaddon has so far refused any and all offers extended by the Chaos Gods to ascend the Despoiler to demonhood. Perhaps Abaddon intends to replace his own progenoid glands with those harvested from Epimetheus, in order to increase his resistance to the corrupting influence of chaos, and in turn allow the Despoiler to remain fully in control of his destiny. Alternatively, perhaps Abaddon wishes to utilize Epimetheus' gene seed as a form of currency in order to convince another powerful individual to aid him in future assaults against the Imperium, such as by offering it to Fabius Bile's Consortium faction, who would no doubt be interested in studying such unique genetic material. Nonetheless, regardless as to what Abaddon intends to do with the Grey Knight's gene seed, this still fails to explain the ultimate fate of Epimetheus himself. This means that it is entirely possible that the Grey Knight could have simply been executed following the harvesting of his gene seed. Despite this, there are hints pointing towards the possibility that Epimetheus could still be alive and may one day be freed from his incarceration. Within the novel Eye of Ezekiel, the Dark Angel's librarian, Ezekiel, is shown a vision of the future by a demon of Tzeentch. In this vision, Ezekiel, alongside Azrael, Kaldor Drago, and a number of warriors from the Dark Angel's own Deathwing company, would journey into the warp space rift known as the Eye of Terror to a great fortress which served as Epimetheus' prison. The very floor and walls of this structure would be constructed out of the still living bodies of psychic nulls, preventing anyone within, prisoner or otherwise, from making use of any warp-based abilities. Azrael would be the one to finally locate Epimetheus within this prison, with the Grey Knight bound in chains and suspended from the ceiling of his cell, with his body exhibiting numerous welts and scars due to having suffered prolonged sessions of torture. While the vision ends here, it's implied that Epimetheus would be rescued from his torment by the Dark Angels. However, whether or not such an event would truly come to pass is another matter entirely. Since this vision was given to Ezekiel by a demon, there is always the chance that such course of action could be little more than lies and deception, as opposed to being a genuine premonition of future events. As such, it's equally possible that Epimetheus will remain a prisoner of Abaddon until he eventually succumbs to his wounds, if he hasn't done so already. Nonetheless, there still remains the faintest of possibilities that Epimetheus will one day be freed. Should the Grey Knight fully recover from the injuries that were inflicted upon him by the Despoiler, then the forces of chaos will once again know his wrath. But then again, if Abaddon had indeed managed to somehow succeed in turning Epimetheus from the Emperor's light before making him swear allegiance to the War Master of Chaos, then perhaps the Dark Angels will one day inadvertently free what could be one of the greatest threats to the Imperium itself. Only time will tell. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.